One of the great things about running a gardening channel is the engagement that I get with all of you guys. The feedback, the comments, and the dialogues that we share is what grows this channel beyond the sum of its videos. And at the heart of that engagement is the questions that we banter back and forth, both from new growers and seasoned veterans. It's the comments, and more importantly, the questions, that allow me insight into what you guys really want to talk about, what you really want to learn. And easily in the top 3 of all the topics we cover on this channel is composting. It doesn't matter if you're an urban patio grower or a large plot rural gardener. Composting questions consistently rise to the top. Today's gonna be a fun one because I've picked out the 6 most commonly asked questions from all you guys on composting. In my world, composting is just as important to gardening as the planting and seeding of my beds. So let's spend the next few minutes and answer your top 6 composting questions. The beauty of composting is that whether we like it or not, it's gonna happen. Spent foliage, stems, roots, and even our mulch all break down over time. And that's composting in its most basic form. Once the parts of a plant are no longer growing, they start to decompose. And that answers our first question, which is, are there any special tools required? No, compost is going to do its thing, and there's not much we can do to stop it. A bin that provides aeration and a rake or pitch to turn the pile can help, but they're not absolute requirements. Which leads us to our second question. How do we get started? Well, that answer is as simple as just making your pile and away you go. Or purchasing a tumbler if you're a patio grower, or constructing your own bin. All are fine and all are going to get the job done. The real key is in making your compost match the size and scale of your garden. This compost here is about 130 cubic feet, and it's not nearly enough for what I need. I could do with 2 of these. But a container deck grower, or even an indoor herb farmer, could easily get away with one of those self-contained tumblers. The key is to just get started and build from there. Now, if you do have the space, building your own is the way to go, especially if you're going to be making a lot of compost material. And that's compost material both from your garden and your yard, as well as your kitchen. Either way, if you're going for a big compost pile and you're just getting started, I like to build a base layer of twigs or branches first. Then add in your first layer of fresh green composting materials, alternating with another dry brown layer. 2 or 3 layers of each, and your compost is on its way. Make sure to choose a level area with good drainage. You never want the bottom of your compost pile to be standing in water. And that's it. Some of the best, most highest functioning composts in the world start out as just a pile on the ground. This next one gets asked a lot, and it's how long does compost take? How long does it take to turn this into this? That answer is easy. It all depends. The rate of decomposition of any material depends mainly on 4 things: moisture, air, heat, and the material itself. Compost piles perform at their best when they're moist. Not saturated, and definitely not soaking wet. 40 to 60% moisture by weight is ideal. Any drier than that, and the microbial activity is severely limited. But if you go the other way and your compost pile becomes too moist, well, it can become anaerobic and stagnant. You see, the moisture level in your compost is directly related to the amount of air in your compost. While air and moisture are both necessary for the decomposition process, they also both compete. They compete for the empty spaces and the gaps in your compost pile's inner profile. They're both directly correlated with each other. Too much moisture, and there's not going to be enough room for air. And that's bad in a compost pile. You see, the microbes and bacteria that actively break down our compost piles are aerobic in nature. They need oxygen. They need that air to complete this process. Moisture and air are key. Find that balance. All right, we're spending a lot of time on compost speed because that question gets asked a lot. So, the third factor that affects the speed of your compost is heat. The inner temperatures of your compost pile directly affect its metabolic rate. It's simple. The warmer it is, the faster your pile is going to work. And when the temperatures are cooler, your compost pile will slow down. The not so simple part though, is that compost piles can get too hot. When the internal temperatures climb above 170 degrees Fahrenheit, beneficial microbes and bacteria may actually perish. Warm is good, but too hot is not. Moderate the extreme temperatures by turning your pile every month or so. Also, layer in your browns and greens to eliminate the hot spots. A mixed heterogeneous compost pile is far more efficient. And finally, the materials themselves also affect your compost speed. A fresh new leaf is going to break down in days, while tough woody stems may take a year or more. But it goes deeper than that, which brings up the next question. What is the CN, or carbon to nitrogen ratio? We see this one asked all the time. What is it exactly? Well, basically, it's the ratio of the two types of ingredients that make up your compost pile. On the one hand, you have your greens, or nitrogen sources. Things such as fresh kitchen waste or garden scraps, grass clippings, weeds, or manures. And in contrast, you have your browns, or carbon sources. Things such as dry leaves, twigs, hay, straw, or cardboard. And that ratio of your carbon sources versus your nitrogen sources by weight is known as your CN ratio. The ideal ratio to shoot for is 30:1. Too much carbon in the decomposition rate will slow right down. But too much nitrogen, or those fresh green compost sources, without those browns to bulk it up, is going to result in a stinky mess. To obtain that perfect balance, that perfect harmony in your compost pile, you're going to want to mix and match your browns and greens. And the ideal rate to do that is at 30:1. The next question we often get is whether or not we should cover our compost piles. And the answer to that is sort of. An unfinished compost does not need to be covered, and it shouldn't, as it needs access to fresh air and moisture. However, if you're worried about pests and vermin, a great way to combat that is to make sure that your top layer is a brown or a carbon source layer. This keeps the fresh kitchen scraps covered, and it should attract way less pests while keeping the pile healthy and active. And finally, rounding out the top 6 most asked composting questions that I get is it worth it? Do the benefits stack up? I think by now you know the answer. Most definitely, if you have the ability, everyone should compost. The list of benefits is endless, so let's look at a few. When put back into your garden, composts enrich the soil both with slow-release nutrients and organic matter. This organic matter in turn increases moisture retention, aeration, and can even improve drainage, especially when added to certain soil types. The addition of compost will also improve your overall soil health, and it's going to encourage the proliferation of beneficial bacteria and microbes. This is going to further increase your soil's productivity. And compost does all this against the backdrop of reducing waste, reducing erosion, and conserving water. 3 very important global macros that are quite relevant these days. Composting and the products of composting are your pathway to a better garden. Hopefully today with this video we answered some of your questions on composting. And hopefully your compost piles at home will be humming along nicely this season. Hey, thanks so much for watching, guys. I appreciate the support more than you know. And if you're getting value from these videos, please like and share them to spread the word and help your fellow gardener to grow better.